Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that all of you could come out today to our chapters meeting. We're very lucky today. This is what we call our JB Tate Memorial meeting. It's every July, the second Saturday in July, and we're so happy that his wife could be with us today, Diane Tate. And we are going to talk about one of his special projects that he worked on here in Cartersville area, and the progress on getting it on the National Trail of Tears route, and acknowledged on the national web pages where they talk about the history. We are so lucky today. We have Jeff Bishop that will be doing the first part of the presentation, and it'll be followed by Angelica Clark Sanchez from the National Park Service is going to talk about what being a property owner of a national trail property, how that they work with you on maintaining that historical preservation of that site. And so Jeff is going to talk to us about Fort Means, which is one of the major removal forts for the Cherokee in North Georgia prior to removing to Oklahoma. And Jeff and JB and several other people had a great deal of research time, and they put together the package that we'll send to the National Park Service to have it certified and get that work started, to have like signage put up at the Fort Means site and that kind of thing. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. He's going to tell you all about the research and what they've done and how it all worked and falls together.
Thank you, Shane. Good morning. How are you? It's good to see everybody. It's like a family reunion every time I go to one of these meetings. So you've heard the term standing on the shoulders of giants. That's what we're doing here today. So, and one of those giants is certainly JB Tate. So JB Tate, really Fort Means was close to his heart, and that's something he worked on really up until the day he died. He actually called me a number of times, even after I was working at the Funk Heritage Center. And for those who don't know, I'm the director of the Funk Heritage Center at Reinhardt University in Waleska, Georgia. And we encourage you to come and visit us. We've got some brochures out there, and we have Indigenous history is one of the main things that we focus on there. So if you've never been, please come. We're open Tuesday through Saturday from 9 until 4. So, and if you do come, make sure that you tell people at the front desk you're there from the Trail of Tears Association. I'll come out and give you a personal tour, so no extra charge. But JB is the one who really started this research, was really passionate about it, really wanted to find that location, and unfortunately we did not get it signed before he passed away, but he really wanted to get that done, and he contacted me a number of times, and we would talk about, you know, the site and things he found at the site. Like he found some relics, he found a button at the site, and he was very excited about that. And so he's one of the giants we're standing on the shoulders of today for sure. I'm very happy that we have this lecture series that's in his honor. Also, another one of those giants, Doug Mabry, did a lot of research with JB Tate. I want to acknowledge him as well. He was out there. He went to, I'm going to talk about him in the presentation a little bit. The research that he and JB did to get this started. And then, of course, Dr. Sarah Hill. She has not done presentations in probably 10 years. You know, she's more advanced in age, and she kind of semi-retired, I guess you'd say. But she is the one who really did a lot of the research to really get all this started. The Trail of Tears was established as a National Historic Trail in the 1980s by the Congress. And then Georgia was more or less excluded in that original legislation. So when I first came on board and worked with people like Leslie Thomas and Tommy Cox, the main thing we were focusing on at first, and Linda Baker was there as well, and probably some of you other folks were there, right from Dola, of course, was right there from the beginning. She was the first president, well, the first, were you the first? You were right there, and you were the one who, I was the one who started it. You were the one who started it, that's right. And then, yeah, and then Patsy, of course, yeah. Well, so one of the things that we were focusing on right from the beginning was, of course, trying to get Georgia included on the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, because that's where most of these Cherokee people were living. So it seemed very egregious to exclude Georgia from that story. So what we were focusing on for many years is trying to locate the road segments, the original road segments that were still extant, and also any sites that we might be able to interpret, to certify, to add to the Trail of Tears when it was, we hoped to be included by the Congress as part of the expanded Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, which it was in 2008, I believe, in an omnibus bill, thanks to Zach Wamp and some other folks. Jack Baker, of course, was very involved in that as well. So we want to give credit where credit's due. All these people, and many I have not named, who were there from the very beginning. And one of the main sites we were trying to find was the location of these fort sites. So there were 14 removal camps and removal forts that were established in the state of Georgia. We really didn't even know how many there were originally, but it's thanks to Dr. Sarah Hill and her research. She went up to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and spent quite a bit of time there, and also to the archives here in Georgia, in Mara. And she just went through the records, bit by bit. A lot of it was not really thoroughly indexed. Nobody really knew what was in those records. And this is before, really the rise of digitization and the internet. You had to actually go to these places and pour through these records, sometimes the original records, which had not even been microfilmed. And so she was going through bit by bit, trying to find anything that would be a clue as to what these forts were, what they were named, where they were, how many soldiers were stationed there, if they're, what they looked like. And she found that the forts actually were quite a bit different from place to place. So Fort Means is one of those 14 fort sites. The first one that we were able to actually find exactly where it was located, fortunately, and this is about the time I came on board. I was trying to help with that. At the time, I was a newspaper reporter, as Linda in the back there remembers. I was working for the Calhoun Times newspaper, actually. And so one of my jobs there at the Calhoun newspaper was every week I'd go to the deed room. And I would go through the deeds and try to figure out, what properties were being sold, what properties were. And so that I was very familiar with the deed room. I was very comfortable in the deed room because I spent a lot of time there. And Dr. Hill found this out about me. And from the time I got involved in the Trail of Tears Association, she's like, "I've got a job for you." She said, "I've got this letter, which we're going to talk about here today, the John Means letter." And this was really one of my first projects with the Trail of Tears Association, was trying to build upon what JB and Doug Mabry had done and try to sort of refine it a little bit and add some more information to it so we could get an exact location for Fort Means. Now, we had already done this successfully with Cedartown. And the reason the Cedartown was our first certified and interpreted site was because we were able to use historic records and deeds. We found a house that was noted in some of the records as the location that was right in front of where the camp was. And because we were able to use a deed to find out the location of that house, we're able to say, well, the camp was definitely right here. And that's really what it is the Park Service likes to talk about the power of place, to know that you're standing right there in the spot where history occurred. And so that really, at first, is what we were trying to do, was just determine exact locations. We figured out that's not always possible. Sometimes these locations are underwater. Sometimes they are, we just don't have enough records to really know where they were exactly. But sometimes we get lucky. And in the case of Cedartown, we got lucky. And also in the case of Fort Means, we got lucky. Fort Means was not as straightforward as Cedartown. Cedartown involved one land lot as a reference point. And because we knew that the camp was right behind that land lot, it was very easy. This was a little bit different, and I'm going to get into this a little bit and tell you why. So Fort Means, it was located, we knew, very near where Kingston is located today. Let's let's see, am I going to point this at the computer? Yeah. So let's talk about Fort Means. Need my reading glasses everywhere I go these days. Yeah. Fort Means was established in April 1838 when Captain John Means of Walton County was directed by Georgia Governor George Gilmer to set up a military post in Floyd County, Georgia, near the dividing line between it and Cass County. Cass County is, of course, Bartow County today. They didn't like the side he took in the Civil War, I believe, and so that was so they decided to rename the county. And near the Etowah River, which the Etowah is the Etowah. And then, let's see, a blockhouse was constructed at Fort Means, and stables and other storage facilities were constructed as well. And 2 mounted companies were stationed at Fort Means and placed under the command of Captain F.W. Cook of Oglethorpe County. And John Means estimated in April, as the fort was being constructed, that 646 Cherokees lived within a 10-mile radius of the fort location, at or near 16 nearby farms. By the end of May, a total of 467 Indians have been rounded up at the fort and taken to Ross's Landing, which is now Chattanooga, Tennessee. And at Fort Means, one Cherokee prisoner was killed trying to escape during the roundup by Private Francis Cuthbert on May 28th. It was reported that the Indian, after having been captured, attempted to escape with some indications of hostility, and in consequence, he was shot by the soldier. A soldier stationed at Fort Means, Private John Malcolm of Walton County, also drowned in the Etowah River during removal operations on June 16th, according to a contemporary newspaper account. And the Fort Means site was evacuated by the military on June 29th, 1838. Okay, so one thing we were doing was looking for those 2 graves, and we did find there's a cemetery on a hill nearby there, near the location I'm going to talk about today, which is a private family cemetery, but there are 2 unmarked graves there, which could possibly be the graves of this Cherokee and the soldier. We don't know for sure. We're not going to go digging up the grave to find out, but we do know that there are, in addition to the family graves, there are 2 unmarked graves that are there. We got a grant, and the Georgia Department of Transportation went there and did some ground penetrating radar, and that's how we found those additional 2 graves. We also, the Trail Tier Association, got a grant from the Park Service, and we employed archaeologist. His name was Mr. Hobgood, and he went out there, and we did a survey of a part of the site. But a letter written by Captain John Means on May 22nd, 1838 offers useful locational information that helped pinpoint the likely location of Fort Means for investigators. And the initial team of investigators was J.B. Tate, as I mentioned, and Doug Mabry. And they went to the deed room in Floyd County, and they went through the court records in 2005 to locate the likely home and farm sites that seemed to correspond with the landowners specifically mentioned in the Means letter. And these landowners were identified as Putnam, Williams, Mann, Lumpkin, Price, General Miller, Major Woody, Judge Underwood, George Underwood, Mr. Burgess, Mr. Miller, Colonel Waters, Lavenders, and Colonel Hardin. So those are the deeds we're talking about here. So again, 467 Cherokee prisoners hastily constructed. Though this was meant to be a temporary fort. Rather large, including stables, living quarters, ammunition. Now, a lot of people mistakenly think that the Cherokees were kept in these as concentration camps, that they were kept there for an extended period of time, and that they were kept within like sort of a prison walls, kind of like what you think of when you think of the Jewish people in the Holocaust of World War II. But it wasn't like that at all. These were staging grounds for the military. This is where they kept their horses. This is where they kept their ammunition. They didn't want the Cherokees messing with their horses and their ammunition. You know, that this was for the military. This was a barracks. It was a military encampment. So the Cherokees, when they were brought to these forts, they were rounded up at their homes and brought to these 14 fort and camp locations before they were taken up to Tennessee and then and some of them onto flatboats and some of them into camps there. Later went on the Trail of Tears. But the Cherokees were actually camped outside of these forts. So they're not within the fort, but outside of them. So the place where you might find, archaeology having to do with the Cherokees. And the other thing to remember is these were ephemeral. These were very ephemeral. They only existed for maybe a few weeks to a month. Most of them. There's a couple of them that were around for longer, but for a fort like Fort Means, very ephemeral. You may not find much of anything archaeologically. Brett Riggs, archaeologist up in North Carolina, he's investigated some of these sites in his state where he has militia maps. And because he has militia maps, he knows exactly where these forts were located. And even when he knows exactly where the fort was located, without any doubt, when he goes in there to do the archaeology, he still sometimes comes up with like next to nothing. So because these sites were so ephemeral, and because they've been picked over by looters, by people with metal detectors over the years, I'm guilty. When I was a little kid, I didn't know any better. I went out with my dad. That's what we do for fun. Rednecks on a weekend, we have a metal detector loaded up in the truck, and we go to churches and we go to these sites and look for artifacts that we didn't know any better. And we would take them home and ooh and ah. And unfortunately, that's very destructive. It really distorts the historical record here. But because of that, you might go and pay for an archaeological dig and not come up with a whole lot to show for your efforts. Even if you're somebody as highly trained as Brett Riggs, who is an archaeologist, who knows where he's looking, who knows where to look, might come away with very little to show for it. Okay, but we do have this letter, which is very informative. So this letter was written in May 1838 by Captain Means. And the Mabry and Tate proposal was that Fort Means was located on land lot 264, based on the deeds they initially looked at in 2005. And this is the map that they drew, where they basically were using a method of triangulation to determine the location of the fort. So Doug Mabry and J.B. Tate said that Nolan Lot 264 is the ideal location in relation to the river and the ferry crossing, the Alabama-Kingston Road, the direct link to Rome, New Echota trails, as well as having an abundance of water on the elevated spot. The George Lavender ownership adds to the interest of Lot 264 because he operated a large freight business and would have wanted the fort supply contracts. Okay, I should say, even from the beginning, and this is what from JB told me over the phone, even from the beginning, even though Doug wrote that, and JB, was in agreement originally, JB had doubts that was actually the site. And he had several other sites that he thought might be better suited. So we're going to talk about the fact that they did the best they could with what deeds they had originally, but then we went about a year or two later and found a lot more deeds. So what I did was went through plantation by plantation, property by property, and transcribed them and try to figure out exactly how deeds might be used to correspond with actual physical locations. So we had Putnam's Plantation 1.5 miles south of this place. And again, this letter was written to try and determine how many Cherokees were living in this area, because they were going to go round them up and take them to the fort. So they were trying to figure out as precisely as they could where these Cherokees were living and how to get to them so they could take them back to the fort. So because of that, we have these pretty precise distances from the fort location. There are this many Cherokees living in this direction. There are this many Cherokees living in that direction. If you check on this farm over here, we think there's Cherokees over there. And so they'll tell you 1.5 miles to the east, or 2 miles to the west, or 5 miles to the south. So if you take all of these and triangulate, as Doug and JB originally were trying to do, you might be able to get to where the center of that is, where the fort was located. So here's a lot of the land transactions here. William Boyd to Jacob Putnam, James Liddell to Jacob Putnam, John Jennings to Jacob Putnam, John Lumpkin to Jacob Putnam. So what I did is I went and basically started plucking these onto a land lottery map from the 1830s. So there's the Putnam lots plopped down onto the map. Okay, there's another transcription from Mr. Williams. 4 cabins, 30 Indians. So then we go in and put Mr. Williams on the map. And then we have Mr. Mann's on the south side of the river, 2 cabins. Here's some more transactions. Mann to Price, Harris to Mann, Lawrence to Mann, Mann to Mitchell. One thing that complicates this is you might have a tract of land getting bought and sold a number of times. You have to figure out who owned that land at the time the letter was written, the John Means letter, where they're trying to, to round up the Cherokees. Okay, one thing that Doug and JB missed, unfortunately, is they were looking for Lumpkin. Well, it turns out that the guy's name actually was Lampkin. So if you don't know that piece of information, you might miss it when you're going through the deed room. So that led to quite a number of additional lots of land here. You can see Mr. Lampkin was very busy buying and selling land. So we have quite a number of them. So we're able to go down and plunk down Mr. Lampkin. And that was one of the key things that was able to sort of shift the fort location to a more suitable site proposal here. These are all the ones dealing with Mr. Price. So you plot those down on the map. So you got Lampkin, Putman, and Price. And then Mr. Fain, 2 miles east side of they spell it Etowah, U-T-I-W-A-H, but that's the Etowah River. Price to Fain. Plop those on the map. And this is all on the bend. You can see that. Let's see. Where's the doohickey here? The light. Oh, that's not what I want. Where's the laser on this thing? The big circle. There we go. It doesn't reflect off the TV, but if you look here, right there, you can see that. I'll just point to this right here. That's a big bend in the river. So that's where we're talking. And this is the county line here. Now the county line has shifted over by a lot. So this not the, this is the that I believe is the original county line, but it changed over time. Let's see here. So we got some more transactions. General Millers. So the Millers, we have quite a number of them. We have Andrew Miller, Homer Miller, John Miller, and Lee Miller. So which Miller was being referenced in the letter? It's kind of hard to cipher out. But luckily, they were all basically on the same land lots or on land lots that were side by side. And then there's a number of other points that were located on the letter. They note the Conicena River, which they spell sort of strangely, C-O-N-I-C-E-N-E. 4 miles east and west side of the Etowah, no Indians. Colonel Waters Plantation on the Oostanaw. We know where Colonel Waters lived over there in what's now Shannon, Georgia. On the Oostanaw River, there were 2 cabins, the Lavenders and Colonel Hardin's. So these are all the different land lots that were referenced in the letter, plot down on the map. Okay, and then there's the George Lavender lot that was originally proposed by Doug and JB. And you see it's pretty far from the river, actually, and also pretty far from the county line. If you read that original letter that was written, the instructions by the governor were to put the fort on, basically on the county line. Matter of fact, John Means of Walton County, it says, quote, establish a post in Floyd County, Georgia, near the dividing line between it and Cass County, and also near the Etowah River. So if you put Fort Means here, it meets all those qualifications. It's the proper distance from all these pieces of property mentioned in the letter, including the additional pieces of property that were found, like Mr. Lampkin, that were missed by JB and Doug originally. And this puts it in all the appropriate distances here from all these different landlord owners. It's also right on the river. It's not, a long distance from the river. It's right on the river. And it's also on the road where the road was originally located, and right on the county line. So it meets all those qualifications. And there's a house there that's really close to this location we're talking about. If you're on the Kingston Highway, I believe people are still living in this house. And strangely enough, all of these land lots here right on the county line are all in the same family, this Miller family. And actually they're connected to the military. General Andrew Miller, he was one of this family. He was a general of the Georgia militia who fought in the War of 1812. The original Millers came from Ireland because of religious beliefs. There were three brothers, John, Andrew, and James. They landed in Pennsylvania, but the time is not remembered. They migrated to South Carolina, Virginia, and one brother's destination was not certain. They said, "We are the descendants of John Miller, who went to South Carolina. He was the father of General Andrew Miller, who was born in Abbeville District, South Carolina. Later, he moved to Georgia and married a Mrs. Crawford, whose maiden name was Miss Cherry. She was a Huguenot who came from France because of the persecutions of the Huguenots." This is all taken from a family history of the Millers. General Andrew Miller was general of the Georgia militia and fought in the War of 1812. There's a bill of sale for Old Grant to Grandma and Grandpa Cherry, which was written by Mr. Crawford. So you have all these pieces of property that meet all the qualifications, that are on the river, on the road, on the county line. And you can see the George Lavender lot that was originally proposed is quite a ways from the county line, quite a ways from the river. Not only that, but it was a military connected family who owned these lots. So it kind of makes sense in a way, because it was the military was the ones, after all, who were doing the removal. Now, the Etowah Road has moved. This is sometimes called the Hightower Road or the Hightower Trail. But this is the road that goes from Kingston to Rome today. The original road was a good ways south of where the road is today. And if you go out there, you'll realize why, because that area gets flooded routinely. So they moved it up to higher ground. There also was a rail line that went through there for a number of years, which makes archaeology difficult, because when you go out looking for artifacts, if there was a rail line that went through there, you might have artifacts that are from that, that are connected to that rail line. But you can see this basically hems you in. You have the road on the north side. You have the Etowah River on the south side. So the amount of property you're looking at for where the fort was located is pretty narrow. Speaking of train, right on cue. So this is a really bad Google Earth representation of that area. But if you go out and look at it, and Diane went out there with me a couple of times, and this is all really near Youngs Mill Creek and Youngs Mill Road there. There's a bridge, I believe, that goes right over it. And if you look to the south off the state highway, this is what you'll see. So this is a spring-fed creek that could have easily been used as a water supply. You have a nice wide open flat area that you could have where you could have built your fort. There's the water there. See crystal clear water even to this day. And there's also a rise there. We went out and did archaeology and found cut nails, one military button, and some whiteware, some pewter whiteware, and a number of artifacts besides that. And so when you take it together with all these different factors, when you look at the distances that we're talking about, using that method that was originally developed by Doug and JB, When you look at all that together, and you look at what was originally directed by the governor, when you look at the artifacts that were found, I think we could safely say that this is the location right there on the border between Cass County and Floyd County. And so feeling, and I had conversations with JB about this, and he agreed that this is the more likely location than the original location that was proposed by him and Doug. So this is a location that he actually originally, before he and Doug even started working on this, strangely enough, this is the location that he was looking at and thinking this was probably where the fort was. But it was only after looking at the deeds that they sort of shifted to the Lavender lot. But again, they didn't find all the deeds is the problem. And so because of that, it really changes your perspective of where the fort was because you didn't have all the information. So strangely enough, the one that when you look at all the deeds and you pinpoint it, what do you know? The location that JB originally thought was the location is actually the location. So I thought that was a nice sort of circle of events. And he was very pleased with that too, actually. It's kind of validated by all this in the end. So so anyway, that's really all I have. I want to talk with Diane. Yeah, Diane, you need to come up here. Can we turn the lights back on?
Jeff, I just want to say that house you're showing, the gentleman, the family that grew up in that house now live in multi plantation. So the oral tradition in Kingston was always that Fort Means was right back behind.
Mm-hmm.
That was the original oral.
And I think that's one of the things JB was going by originally was that the oral tradition.
And
so,
and I pulled right in that driveway.
We did. So Diane, can you come up here for just a second? Can talk about, we have actually gone out and spoke with some of these property owners. Now, unfortunately, the actual property that the fort was located on, or very likely located on, is not really accessible easily from the road. You have to go back a ways to get to it. Again, the original road was south of where the road is now. And not only that, but a couple of the property owners really don't want anybody going back there. And I don't know that we want people going back there because you could have looting, as I mentioned earlier. It would encourage people to be nosing around wherever they shouldn't be. So Diane had an alternative proposal where there's a site that's already open to the public that already has adequate parking. And I believe the landowners are in favor of going ahead and doing something there. And the thing is, if you go and park there, you can look out. If we put a wayside exhibit up in this location, you look out and you can look and see where the fort was. It's right in front of you so we could actually put a sign there that, says Fort Means, and you could just look out over it and that's where it was. So and there's a fence there. So we don't encourage people to go walking to it. And also there's people there managing that property. So that would also discourage, I believe is there a farmer's market there sometimes, or what's that in there?
Okay, I wanted to know which site you were talking about.
Well, there's two sites we were looking at.
There's two sites we were looking at, and one, they do sell vegetables, and it's a little stone house, maybe the caretaker's house.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes right back to Reynolds Bend. So right there is a natural place and would not take much infrastructure work. Now, the place that Jeff and I liked that was also good.
It's beautiful.
Is beautiful, but it's a drop off. And that owner would very much like to have it at his site. There's 4 places lined up, 4 plantations, farms lined up. And any one of them could be appropriate for the sign.
Now, the site that she's talking about, the second site, is closer to the actual fort site. So that's an advantage. And it is gorgeous. And it's right there on that creek that I showed in the pictures on Young's Mill Creek. And the owner really would like to do something there. The only problem is the parking. And it is a kind of a precipitous drop off there.
And it's right, again, the oral tradition is that Fort Means was right behind the Kingston house. And the Kingston house steps are still there. This was moved back in the 40s or 50s to Stone Mountain State Park. But the steps are still there, so there's even more oral tradition to go along with the research. Don't you agree, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. McCallahan is here today with us. What we can't decide is which plantation was the Putnam plantation now. Which one is it now, Jeff? Do you know?
I don't know. I'd see it. I have to look that up. We've got it on the map here, but I have to actually go there and look and see.
The Floyd County people aren't sure either.
Well, we know the land lots because of the sales. I would just have to go and see how that lines up with, plot it, exactly.
The other thing is out walking with some of these archaeologists, we did find the railroad bed. And that was interesting. It really stood out, and it goes across at least 3 of these plantations. So one thing that Sharon wanted us to do today is encourage people to find a good spot for these signs to do the hard research. Gosh, this started in 2005, Jeff.
2005, and I think JB was working on it even before that. So
do the tough research and then get out there. Jeff and I had a good time talking to some of these farmers. Some of them are very anxious to have the sign at their place, and yet you have to think about where people park and DOT, and it's some of those concerns. But most everyone you talk to wants to honor the Native Americans just like we do, and that's really fun to go out and.
Were they the people you talked to, were they knowledgeable about Fort Meade, or were they like?
no, not really.
Not much. Not much. One gentleman just said, want government on his property, that's what he told Jeff and me. So we said, we're not government, we're just volunteers,
Yeah, that's the thing we have to tell folks. We're not the government. We're just folks who love history. So yeah.
And then one gentleman said, we just knocked on the door. We just knocked it. And I said, hello, I'm Diane Tate. And he said, I know who you are. I called you when you were with the Etowah Valley Historic Society to ask about this property. Would I be able to do anything I wanted to with it? And that's where the Kingston House is. That's where the steps are. And I said to him, you're in the county. You can do anything you want to with your property, but I hope you don't. Because I hope you're respectful of what we think is there, and that is Fort Meade. So Jeff and I knock it. Jeff sends me up, hoping that I'm going to be shot. He's driving the car.
She's less threatening, not.
And he said, I know who you are. He said, I would be really glad if it ended up being on my property. It was very, very nice, wasn't it?
It was.
He and his daughter.
Most everyone was very nice. There was even the people who don't want it there are nice. I mean, there was one guy. One of the property owners who he drove up pretty aggressively, pretty fast to where Diane and I were standing. We're like, what's going on here? And he rolled down the window. But it turns out after you talk to him, actually a really nice guy. He just, he doesn't want people he doesn't know nosing around on his property. And how many of us can relate to that? We all feel that way, right? We don't like people we don't know nosing around on our property. No, that's pretty common. That's how we all feel about it. So you have to find a balance between that and preservation of history. So
and Jacqueline Wright was very much involved about 5 or 6 years ago.
I tried to get her here today. Yeah, I was hoping she would come. Just all 4 of those farms were. Now, the Waters family on the 4th plantation, Jeff, I noticed this Waters was 1 T. That's 2 T's, the Waters family of Oakdale Plantation, Russell. It's not the same family with it. It's just a coincidence.
Depends on how far back you go. I don't know. They change their spelling.
yeah, sometimes they change the spelling. Yeah.
Could be the same.
I don't think, as far as I know, it's not the same thing.
So they have in their home an actual land lot. In other words, when you go to their home, I'm sorry, I can't see this picture. In the hallway, when you're walking around, they actually have the district marked. And then you have to go into the land lots within the district, and that right, Jeff. So when JB and I were in the home, I took a picture of that just to refer to. All these little pieces help. Everything helps that you can do. And I opened, the lady, Mrs. Waters, said while she was showing JB something else, she said, Diane, you're welcome to open that top drawer and look, there's material on the home and the land lot and so forth. And I opened it up, and the very top letter was from Kennesaw University. It was J.B. writing. So that did go back before 2005.
Mhm.
He had been corresponding with this Mrs. Waters' Oakdale plantation.
That family's been there for a long time, I believe.
It may be the same Waters. I was noting that Jeff said,
I think it
one
is
tea.
the same.
interesting.
I wanted to mention too that I may have already said this, but we found a military button here on whenever the archaeologist was out there. And JB was quick to show me that he was on that same property that we were investigating with the archaeologist. And he also had found, or maybe a friend of his had found, but he had possession of this button, this military button that they had found as well. So that was
I still got
interesting.
that one.
You've got that
I've
one.
got
Did you
Yeah.
that.
date the military button?
That's kind of difficult because they actually, I'm not a button expert. I don't claim to be a button expert. Apparently the button that we found in archaeology was not of the right period, but I think JB's is of the correct period. So
Was it brass or steel?
I don't remember. I think ours was brass, but I'm not sure.
Were you able to use a ground penetrating radar?
We did. No, not on the button.
Fort Meade.
We did. We used ground penetrating radar on a portion of it. There's a portion of the site that we wanted to investigate that is owned by a different property owner, and he didn't want anything to do with any of this. Understandably, I'm not critical of anybody who doesn't want to participate. It's your property. I mean, hey, your property is your property. But for those who are willing to cooperate, I think I'm sure we can successfully get this done. We have the research done. We have the will to get it done. I think the Park Service also wants to help us get it done. I think we could set a deadline for ourselves of getting it done and get the sign up maybe even by the end of this year. I would like to see that. And I think we could do that, or at least get the process really going strong, because this is a sort of an easy get. They talk about low hanging fruit. The Park Service likes to talk about that. Low hanging fruit. I know Steve Burns used to say that a lot. This is low hanging fruit. This is something we have the records. We've done the research. We know where it was. We've got property owners who are willing to cooperate. It's really just a matter of just doing the final steps.
Did they dig their post in the ground? Is there, like I know a lot of the Indian villages or Native American villages, they would find those posts that would mark the site, like the king site. Is there a possibility? I'm
Yeah.
sure y'all looked into that.
There was a blockhouse on the site. We know that for a fact, but it could have been on the part that we couldn't access. We did not find the outline of a blockhouse where we looked, but there's also a big chunk of the property we thought the fort, was located.
They have stockade. They put stockade around the block or here.
We don't know that for sure. We know there was a blockhouse. So probably there was, but again, we didn't find evidence of that where we looked. So,
Jeff, if you could put this sign anywhere, where would you put it?
well, if you want something quick and easy, I'd say where they sell the vegetables, because they already have the parking. They've already got and what's that landowner's name? What's her name? Waters. Okay. I would say the Waters site probably because they already have a place where you could drive in there. There's a beautiful place for the sign. The sign points to the place where the fort was, and there's people there to sort of make sure there's nothing, untoward going on. I love the other side as far as the look of it and the feel of it and the fact that it's closer to the fort, but it would require money and development, I think, unless the property owner wants to help us with that.
It was beautiful. That's where Young's Creek comes in.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just.
Well, and some of
we
these,
almost sat down and had a picnic. It's really beautiful.
that's the place she's talking about is right here in these pictures. This is that place. And that's what you see right from the road there, like right there. And it is a gorgeous place. And there's, it's a really sort of a place of meditation, I guess you'd say. So it does evoke the past. And if I had unlimited resources, here's two kind of answers to your question.
Yeah.
If I had unlimited resources, like to develop the parking that we need there, then this would be my favorite spot. If you drive out there, probably for all of you, your favorite spot would be this one. It's closer to the fort site. It's closer to the county line. It has that creek flowing through there. It's a gorgeous place. It's just the parking is the only thing is the issue.
It
But
does drop off.
that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that we'd have to find the money to get that done.
And here's the other one. It's just a flat drive in from the highway and, you can see how flat it is. And then that hillside he's talking about over. And someone is there.
Mhm. So if you want something that's easier, probably quicker to get accomplished, it takes less money, then that's probably the most
Yeah.
practical way to do it. So, and really, it's not for me to decide or for Diane to decide. Really, it's for this group as a whole and the Park Service, I guess, together to decide. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. Thanks. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for all the work you've done.
We had a good time.
We did. And thank you for the ability to do this great work. I really have enjoyed working on this project. So thank you so much.
We are lucky enough to have the Park Service with us this morning. Angela Sanchez-Clark is our liaison with the National Trail for working with setting up signage and documenting our sites. So now that we have Fort Means pretty much nailed down, and we have the property owners engaged with the effort, I thought it would be a good idea today, on the special day, that we have Angela come online with us. The Park Service office is out in New Mexico, correct? Yep. And so she is going to talk to us about what happens next once you have found a location. If you have a site that needs to be documented and be available for a public to view the site, or otherwise engage with the signage that may explain more about the site. And if you hold on just a second, we should be able to do that.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, give me 1 second.
We're going into a whole new age of conferences and history, aren't we?
All right, and I will go ahead and see if I can get you up on presenter mode here. Bear with me, this meeting is being recorded. Okay, thank you. Where, let's see, view. Yeah, if you can make her, can you do that from your side? All right. There we go. All right. Let me go ahead and redo this. Let's see. Bear with me. You were up there earlier. Display. Connected. Devices allow input. It's not video. Webcam settings.
This is where I need my 14-year-old to come in.
Yeah.
Go right through it.
She was up there earlier whenever we were testing it.
It's my fault.
So
Push one too many buttons.
let's see. No, I do not want to leave the meeting.
That's always the way it is with technology. Very good.
Yeah. Let's see. Video. Video
And I do have my camera on, so you'll know it works when you see my big face on the screen.
Everybody's seeing my ugly mug right now. I apologize to everybody. No one wants to see this at this early in the morning. Let's see display settings. Display settings. We are going to duplicate these displays. There we go. Keep changes. This computer likes to. Hey,
Oh.
all right.
There I am. All right. Are you all ready for me?
Yes.
And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Give you a little bit
Okay.
more volume. You're all set.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so I am going to share my screen and let me know when you can see my, hold on one second. All right, so I think you're all seeing my first slide there.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join your meeting today. My name is Angelica Sanchez-Clark, and I am the Partnerships and Outreach Coordinator with the National Park Service National Trails Office. And so today I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about how to partner with the National Trails Office, and specifically about the National Trails Certification Program. And I am gonna try to figure out how to advance. Oh, there it is. There's my next slide. The wonders of technology. So before I talk specifically about what our office does and how to partner with us, I wanted to give a little bit of background about National Historic Trails and about the work that our office does. And this is really just a little bit of background for those of you that are here with us today that might be wondering how the National Park Service is involved with the Trail of Tears. So our the National Trails Office, which is my office, administers 10 of the 21 National Historic Trails. And the 10 trails that we administer span more than 29,000 miles across 24 states. We also administer the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program, which is that black line that you see kind of like in the middle of the map. And as some of you know, it actually intersects in several places with the Trail of Tears. So the 10 trails that you see here on this map, in the northwestern end of the country, we have the California, Oregon, Pony Express, and Mormon Pioneer National Historic Trails. The trails in the southwest that we administer are El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, El Camino Real de los Tejas, the Old Spanish Trail, and the Santa Fe Trail. The newest National Historic Trail that was designated in January of 2023 and assigned to our office is the Butterfield Overland National Historic Trail. You see that in the orange line on the map. And that trail also intersects in a few places with the Trail of Tears. So on the eastern end, of course, we have the Trail of Tears, which is displayed there in the blue and turquoise color. All right, so as we just heard, the Trail of Tears was designated as a National Historic Trail in 1987. And in 2009, there was a feasibility study, an additional feasibility study undertaken to study additional routes and places. And so those were added to the designated trail into
No,
Looks like her microphone went off. Yeah. Nice to be able to hear you if somebody can go up and tell her. I'm sure.
She's probably sending a message.
I'm putting it. Look, she stopped sharing.
Hey, I'm sorry, did I lose you all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I am so sorry about that. So I'm gonna share my screen again. Give me 1 second. All right, let me see if I can start where I left off, but I'm gonna try to get into the slide. All right. Okay, can someone tell me where I was when I lost you all?
right there. You were just
Right
starting to
here?
talk eastern part.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You were just starting to talk about the eastern part. You talked about the Orange Trail, and then you shifted over to the.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. Sorry
The
about
last
that.
words, the last words you heard were feasibility study.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so in 2009, after the completion of additional feasibility study, additional routes and places were added to the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail. So the period of significance that's legislated for this trail is 1838 and 1839. And so that becomes really important when our office works with partners on partnerships involving certified sites and things like that, because most of our technical assistance really does have to be provided to those stories and those places that fit within this period of significance. All right. So the National Trails office is headquartered in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but we also have offices in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I'm joining you from today, and we have an office in Salt Lake City, Utah. So our staff is made up of interpretive specialists, landscape architects, GIS specialists, archaeologists, historians, planners, and partnership and outreach specialists. Our goal is to help partners along the trails find ways to develop, preserve, and promote the National Historic Trails. Are the key functions of the National Trails Office. So we are divided up into teams, but in reality, we work across teams and collaborate with each other and with our partners to provide these services. So our GIS team produces GIS products such as online maps, apps. They produce paper maps for the public visitation and provide all kinds of ways for partners and the public to interact with our public-facing GIS platforms. Our history team conducts research, helps to confirm the accuracy of stories, and seeks new and diverse stories that we can share with the public that provide different perspectives about the histories of these trails. The cultural resources teams can provide guidance on resource protection. We do have a limited role in authority for resource protection because the National Park Service does not own any of the land that these National Historic Trails traverse, but our cultural resource team is available to provide some help and some advice when appropriate. Our design and development team, which I'm going to talk about in detail a little bit later, they help to mark the trail with the official trail logo. So they're the ones that you would work with to provide road signs, to provide site identification signs, but they also help to provide site plans. So they work with you to figure out what is the best way of providing public access that also protects the resources. So the partnerships and outreach team, which I lead, we work with partners to identify new and diverse stories and partnerships that help us broaden our engagement with the National Historic Trails. And so I also serve as a liaison between trail partners and our National Trails Office staff. And then we have our planning team, which leads our planning efforts internally and is also available to provide support to our partners. So for example, if you're seeking training opportunities for your chapter association, or if you are working on strategic planning, we are available to help with that if you would like. All right. So now let's talk about partnership and outreach coordination. As administrators, the National Park Service does not own or manage any of the lands that the National Historic Trails traverse. So it's through public and private partnerships that we fulfill the core purpose of National Historic Trails, which is historic preservation and public use and enjoyment. So we work with colleagues and partners to identify needs and resources regarding the establishment of new partnerships and the reinvigoration of current partnerships, with the goal of increasing engagement with underserved, underrepresented, and diverse audiences. So this includes working with our partners in Mexico on the 2 Caminos Reales that we administer, establishing new university partnerships along the trails, engaging with community volunteer organizations such as yourselves, and working with tribal nations to facilitate the sharing of the Native American experiences of the National Historic Trails from their own perspectives and in their own culturally meaningful ways. So there are many, many ways of partnering with the National Park Service. Of particular interest to many of our partners is the Partnership Site Certification Program, which I manage for the National Trails Office. So this program is specific to National Trails, and it's open to any willing non-federal landowner or site manager. So this partnership helps landowners protect and preserve their historic trail properties and trail segments and share them with others. We also enter into voluntary agreements with museums and visitor centers that are located near the trail and that offer some sort of trail information or interpretation for the public. So we voluntarily agree to work jointly on planning, interpretation, resource management, and other other matters, and always striving to meet the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plans for the trails. So some of the basic requirements for certification. So first and foremost, it is a voluntary agreement. There must be some sort of public access, and we can talk about what that looks like. We have been very creative and flexible in defining what public access is. There needs to be a willingness to promote the site for the public, because again, the purpose of site certification is to provide places that the public can visit to learn more and to engage with the history of the trail. And so we do that by promoting the site. If you're seeking certification as a historic site, there needs to be really good research and documentation that confirms that historical association to the trail. And if you're seeking certification as an interpretive facility, such as a museum or a visitor center, that site should be located near the designated alignment and already offer some sort of interpretation or engagement with the public. So what are the benefits of certification? Well, one thing that I find really love is that it formalizes their relationship with the National Park Service. It also helps our office to prioritize our technical assistance. You do not need to be a certified partner to work with our office. I do want to make that very clear. But we do look to see if a partner has a certification agreement with our office, and that does help us prioritize our technical assistance. Again, partners get to promote their site on our trail website, on the National Park Service website, and on the National Park Service app. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And finally, we all gain new partners and new places that can really help us to promote the Trail of Tears for the public. That is really what is behind all of the work that we do, is preservation, protection, and promotion. Okay, so how do you get started if you're interested in partnership site certification? Well, the path to certification can take different routes. When our staff is on travel, and we travel a lot across the country, we might visit new sites that we were not familiar with. We might meet new partners that are interested in working with us. So if they're interested in learning more about certification, we'll set up a time to talk with the property owners or the managers and talk about the requirements and the benefits. And then after that, if they're interested, I'll send them the certification property forms to fill out and to send to me, along with any photos or any historic documentation they might have. So this kicks off our internal review process, which is a really important part of our path to certification. So many times, association members such as yourselves are the first point of contact with potential certification partners. You're the one that knows your communities, your neighbors, and your history. And we are very well aware of the fact that some people are a little bit wary of working with the federal government. So it's really great when you can tell them that we are not so bad, right? And in fact, we all have the same goals. So to work together to protect and develop and promote these special places. It's important to remember that not every site is going to meet the certification requirements, and also that certification is not always the best fit for all partners. So for example, if a private landowner is concerned about public access, or concerned about having their contact information posted, we might have to look at other ways for us to partner. Certification is not the only way that we work with stakeholders. So again, it's really important to keep in mind that the goal of the certification program is to provide places where the public can visit to learn about the history of the trail. So many of the Georgia chapter members have been working really hard um, to identify and to research these places in Georgia. So if you're new to the program, I'd be happy to set up a time to talk separately and go over the process. You can also visit our website to learn more about the program. The property forms that kick off our internal review process are relatively easy to. We can also help you with that. I've even filled out the forms over the phone with partners. And speaking of partners, the certification process involves several, right? It might be you if you're advocating for certification. It might be a local or state government agency if they own a site that is interested in certification, or it might be a private landowner who's interested in protecting a part of the National Historic Trail that runs through the property. But at some point in the process, I will need to meet with the person who is actually authorized to sign the certification agreement. So that's like really important. And in my experience, especially with private landowners, it's best to meet with them early in the process so we can all be on the same page regarding the requirements as well as the benefits. Right, so let me catch up here. All right, so what happens next? So, our collaboration with our trail association partners is key to bringing the history of the trails to the public. As we've already seen here today, your research and outreach to landowners helps us identify those places that should be recognized for their significance. So what happens after you've completed this important step towards preserving these iconic places along the Trail of Tears? At some point in the process, please reach out to our office. If you're already working with somebody in our office on a project, they can put you in touch with me, or oftentimes they'll forward me your contact information and let me know that you want to talk about certification, and I'll reach out to you. I will need to review the property forms and the documentation. And I want to recognize that this part has proven to be frustrating in the past. The Georgia chapter has a list of potential certifications that they've been working on for a while, sometimes for years. And I understand that you've already sent some materials to the National Trail of Tears Association that might not have made it to my office, or you might have already submitted paperwork to my former supervisor who retired in 2019. But I will be setting up a meeting after this one to talk specifically about the list that you've already identified and figure out our next steps for moving forward. So I just want to assure you about that. Many partners are eager to start discussing right away the placement of trail signs, site identification signs, interpretive waysides, identifying where people can park, etc. So many of those decisions actually are projects, right? So, and these are projects that will involve technical assistance from the National Trail staff. And that oftentimes that is technical assistance from our landscape architects, our design and development team, who work on conceptual site design, trail development, and sign plans. Oftentimes that involves working with our interpretive specialists to develop or review interpretive content, and working with our history team and our GIS team to verify relevancy and accuracy of locations and history, etc. So our office can work with you and the property owners to set up in-person site visits so our team can see the property in person, hear your ideas, and also offer our expertise and advice. You know, personally, it's been amazing for me to see my colleagues in action out in the field, working with partners and brainstorming to come up with innovative solutions that work best for everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens with our interpretive team. So again, preserving, protecting, and promoting these important places involve multiple partners working together with our office. Our interpretive specialists can work with you to discuss the types of media that work best to share the story of your particular site with the public. And sometimes we forget that the public is our audience, right? It's not necessarily our association members or our staff. Instead, we need to focus on the people that are choosing to spend their valuable time visiting sites along the trail. And we need to figure out, you know, what's their motivation? Are they on a family vacation? Are they interested in local history? Are they interested in standing in the footsteps of the people for whom these trails were designated? Those are all the motivations that our interp team has in mind. So their methodology includes planning for inclusive, diverse, and universal human relevance, looking for opportunities to develop a whole package of media, right? Not just something that is physically in the ground, but something that can reach a wider audience. They talk with the partners to identify the stories that can be told at a specific site and to decide what is the best medium for sharing that story. You know, oftentimes a wayside isn't the answer, especially if not many people can access it. Or it might not be the first answer. You know, waysites can take time to design, develop, and install, but digital content is much faster and helps us to reach a wider audience. So here are some examples of the type of digital content that we've created in partnership. And because it's digital, we can share this across many, many platforms, such as the National Park Service app. Of course, it gets shared on our Trail of Tears website, but the content also gets shared across the National Park Service, which has been really amazing for increasing our reach. So together, these elements represent a media package that help us reach a much wider audience. So many of you have also already worked with our design and development team, which offers technical assistance such as site planning, trail development, and trail signage. So I think you would all agree that signage with the official trail logo is really important because it creates a cohesive identity across the trail. And so that's our goal, right? That's our goal, is to mark the trail and to put up what we call site identification signs, all with the Trail of Tears official logo. And then that helps to provide that identity. But our team of landscape architects also works with partners to provide safe access, to figure out where a parking lot should go, to figure out how to deal with erosion issues, right? To provide that safe access, to develop and incorporate recreational opportunities. Again, that's super important for engaging with the public. And, we're also available to attend dedication ceremonies, which helps us get lots of media attention. And I think that's always good for everyone, because we want people to learn and to care about the National Historic Trail. So, a lot of times, this site design work, it happens best in person. And so I had mentioned that was one of the things that we do, is we travel a lot, and we'll set up meetings, we'll, set up workshops if that's what the partners want. But again, always with that goal of, working together to sign the trail, to identify the sites, but always to make sure that it's in the safest and most accessible way. So I've given you all a lot of information. I just really want to thank you all for everything that you do to protect and preserve the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail. And I'm going to be sharing some of the links that I mentioned in my PowerPoint, as well as my contact information. I will do that after this meeting, and then that can be shared out to all of you. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And yeah, please let me know if anybody has any questions.
Yes, Angela, does anyone in the audience have a question? Yes, Diane.
Can it be wayside signage and digital? Both.
Okay.
I didn't hear that yet.
Okay, Angela, we have a question of whether the signage can be a wayside signage and digital on
Yes.
so that they match up together.
Yes. So
signs at the actual site, and also digital package.
Yeah. So a lot of times when we design, develop, and then you all install an interpretive wayside, right, which is different from like the signs, but a wayside that gets posted on our website. And so, because we have to remember, not everybody is going to be able to travel to all of these sites. And so our office really utilizes our digital content to reach a much wider audience. So the content, those interpretive waysites, those are put on our on our website. And we also provide audio descriptions and just try to make them as accessible to everyone.
Does that answer your question, Diane? Yeah. I also have a question about that. For the sites that are more digital and not all that, I guess, something that people can get to. Does your interpretive team actually take video and kind of then like overlay with what would have been there, or that kind of thing?
Yeah.
That question.
Yes, we can do that. So what we've done for lots of sites is to create like these 3-minute videos that capture images of the site if it exists now, right? Or we use historic photos and things like that to really share the history of the site. And one of the reasons that I was stressing about that certification may not be the best fit for all partners, and it is because of that, right? Because if they're concerned about public access, then certification may not be the way to go. But that doesn't mean that we can't share the history of that particular site. And we make it very, very clear on our website that this is a private property, not accessible. We don't promote the address. We might kind of give an idea of the general area, this is an important place in the state of Georgia or whatever. But that's one of the things that our interpretive team is really focusing on is what we call our places pages. And it's not just to feature those places that people can visit in person. So yeah, they're very, very creative in how they can help to highlight those important histories.
If nobody else has a question, I have one more about actually the development of the interpretive materials that would be installed at the site. Say Fort Means is the next on your list to do. What is like the process and the timing? How fast do
Yeah.
you do it? And
Yep.
do we have to come up with the funding, or is the National Park Service going to come up with the funding?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So, that's one of the reasons. So like for an interpretive wayside, those take a long time to develop. And it really is going to be up to the partner how you want to get started on that. We have some partners that develop the content and then send it to us to review. Or you can ask for that help. And then our interpretive team. So for example, we're coming up into August, right? So our current fiscal year ends at the end of September, and our new fiscal year starts October 1st. So we are now getting together in the office and discussing projects and requests for technical assistance. And then each team decides, yep, we can do this. We can do it now, or it's going to take a little while, etc. So they'll reach out, and I'm putting basically Fort Means in general as a request for FY25, because that's going to involve several of our teams. So, and just to kind of manage those expectations, our interpretive team has lots and lots and lots of projects already in the queue. So interpretive waysides take a while, but that's why I mentioned that digital content is much faster. So we still have to review Fort Means internally, right? It still has to, because it hasn't gone through our internal review process, right? Once it does that, and we enter into a signed agreement, right? We can do digital content like right away. Our digital media specialist will reach out and get a places page filled out. That will go up on our website, on the National Park Service app. That happens very quickly. The signage happens relatively quickly. The site identification sign with the logo, all of that happens relatively quickly. But I do think that Fort Means is a little bit of a complicated site, because we've got, some property owners that are on board, some that are not. There's discussion about where it might be best to place a sign or wayside. And so I am going to propose that we go out in person later in the fall. Definitely prioritizing Fort Means, but if there are other sites, and I'll be working with all of you to figure that out, right? But if there are other sites that we can logistically maybe visit, that is really going to be the best way for us to really figure out where is the best place to do this work. Now, I do also want to say, you don't have to work with us. Like if you want to put up your own interpretation, you can do that. You won't be able to use our official trail logo, But of course, we would love to like have you reach out to us and work with us officially. But you don't have to. But if we're talking about using, the official trail logo and things like that, then we need to be involved in the process.
Yes. Okay. Let me check and see. Anyone else have any questions about what the National Park Service can do once we get the information to them about the sites? I don't see any other hands, but
Okay.
you'll be hearing from us
Oh
very
yeah,
soon.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll be reaching out as well because I want to set up a follow-up meeting to talk about the other sites that you all have already been working on. I want to make sure that I'm tracking everything, and it may mean starting fresh, but we'll do it.
Thank you very much,
You're
Angelica.
welcome. I hope it was helpful. I'll follow up with some of the links. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will turn it over to Leslie for our president for our general meeting.
Yeah, and it will not be long. You can cut us off. Thank you, folks, for coming.